This has been an amazing series. That's really all I need to say. That's really all this video needs to be about. This is an amazing series between the Pacers and the Knicks. Indiana's up 2-0 now. And Indiana's going to be home for games 3 and 4. Do I think the Pacers are going to sweep the Knicks? No. I think the Knicks are at least going to take a game. But if the Pacers are able to do that, we've now seen Minnesota's taking a game off Oklahoma City. Indiana would get as much rest as they possibly can until June. But this has just been amazing. I mean, Pacers Knicks at it again. It's been a while. It's been a whole year since they played in the playoffs against each other. But every decade since the 90s has had its own iteration of Pacers versus Knicks. At some point, they have had to meet in the Eastern Conference playoffs, and it's been amazing. It's been amazing once again. I mean, game one, we can go back to it. Tyrese Halliburton and the Pacers once again just breaking the heart of every Knicks fan and crushing it into a million little pieces. Indiana, in a season full of crazy comebacks, in a playoff full of crazy blown leads and comebacks, Indiana was able to do it again on still an even bigger stage than before. And you move into game two where Pascal Siakam just goes absolutely insane. 39 points, 15 for 23. Brunson had a great game again, as expected. But Indiana just able to make shot after shot when they've needed to. They're called the Pacers for a reason, Tyler. They play with great pace. It's as simple as that. Their tempo's fun to watch. It's been a firefight these two games. I'm loving it. I hope this thing goes 7 games because this series deserves it. But Indiana might just try to end this thing in 4.
Yeah, they might. I mean, Indiana's been on a heater. Tyrese Halliburton is on that overrated revenge tour,
He
showing
is.
everybody what's up. And then, what makes Indiana so fun is that you don't know necessarily night to night. Halliburton will give you some, but he may have an off night, and all of a sudden here comes Miles Turner, or all of a sudden here comes Pascal Siakam. Like they've got so many guys that can just go out and have a big night. It's tough to lock in on them. Other teams, right? Knicks, Brunson, he's going to give you something every night. In Thunder, right? SGA, you're going to guarantee most of the time get at least 20 or so from him. And all these teams have those guys, but Indiana's kind of amoeba at times. If Halliburton's not hidden from the field, he's got other ways to affect the game with his defense, with assisting, rebounding, and it goes for a lot of those guys. So it makes them a tough guard, I think. And then their style of play, we've seen it on display against the Knicks, where they're going to try to turn it into a track meet, and they're not going to sit there and relent. And that's part of the reason they came back, where the Knicks kind of took the foot off the gas. They understood they did, and that Indiana made them pay for it. So you got to admire that style of play.
Yeah, but I mean, let's start with game 2. We'll kind of work our way backwards here. Game 2, Indiana starts the game on a 10-0 or a big run. Shouldn't say a 10-0 run, but they start the game, big punch in the mouth, and it got a little quiet at MSG. It got a little quiet in the Garden of, okay, is this really going to happen? Did we really hype up the Knicks' 25-year wait to get to this moment just for them to get beat up by Indiana again? But the Knicks came to play. They came back. It was a great back and forth the entire night. But when the moment needed to go to somebody, someone had to step up. It was Pascal Siakam doing it. Halliburton, 5 for 16, did not have a great night. But when he's still able to get 8 boards, he still has 11 assists, only 1 turnover. He's still able to affect the game. And that's what makes him such a fun player. I still don't know how he was the most overrated guy in the league. I don't get that. I don't know who did that.
By his peers. That's what's always going to drive me crazy about that. By his peers.
By his peers. The most overrated players 2 wins away from the finals. I mean, it's just crazy to think about. And then Miles Turner had an okay game, but anyone on Indiana could step up. And I mean, that is what is so crazy about that. That it's just, they're fun to watch. They have their stars, but anybody, like you said, on any given night can be the guy. And then for the Knicks, Jalen Brunson already mentioned it, played great. Karl Anthony Towns, the main story out of this for Knicks fans was he only had 28 minutes. I mean, this is a Tibbs coach team. 28 minutes, you usually have to be in foul trouble or dead to not be playing at least 30 minutes, especially in a playoff game. That was a bit confusing. Why? I mean, I get it. You look at his plus minus and it's a minus 20. I mean, it's the worst by far of any of the Knicks. But he had 20 points. He was still playing okay. But, Cat missing a decent amount of the fourth quarter there. It was another game for the Knicks where it comes down to the wire. You feel like you have a good shot. You get right back into the game and you just let it slip away, or Indiana yanks it away, which really, depending on which team you're a fan of, is how you're going to describe that. But just a brutal game for the Knicks. And how many times have we said that in the last 5 to 10 years for the Knicks? Just a brutal game down the stretch. Have all the opportunities in the world, and you just can't capitalize on it. And if you're Indiana, this is what they do. They just boat race you, or it's going to be a high-paced game. And when you're able to play in that, you go against a team that's trained to play back and forth for 48 minutes. Most teams are going to wear down at some point, and Indiana just doesn't. It was incredible to me to watch. They could just get, half-court pass, lob it down to a guy who's just streaking out past 2 or 3 different defenders. And there's 3 minutes left in the game. You should be near exhausted at that point, but they aren't. They just continue to go back and forth the entire time. That is who they are. And game 2 would not have been as brutal for New York if game 1 went their way. And they were a few minutes away from that being fine. Okay, you can, I guess, afford to lose a game. You don't want to. No one ever wants to lose a playoff game. Duh. But game 1, I mean, this is one of the best playoff games it feels like in a long time. And that's crazy to say because we've had 2 Knicks 20-point comebacks against Boston on the road. Indiana's done this once a series now. They did it to Milwaukee, they did it at Cleveland, and now they did it here against New York. But just the combination of Tyrese Halliburton and Aaron Nesmith being possessed by Reggie Miller, who is not dead, so I don't know how that works, but still, possessions I think could still happen like that. It was just unbelievable. It's one of the best playoff games that I think I've sat down for a moment. And again, in a season with all the postseason with all the craziness that's happened, that might be one of those moments that just goes down that we talk about 20 to 30 years from now. Man, do you remember where you were when that happened?
It could. It depends on how Indiana finishes this thing off, right? I think at least for Eastern Conference lore, no doubt. But is it going to be talked about nationally like that? That more so depends on how Indiana finishes this whole thing.
Yeah, it's just with the way the series is going now, this is Indiana's to lose. It just is. You're up 2-0. You're going home. I cannot wait to see what the crowd looks like for that game. That is going to be an insane crowd for game 3. I mean, you want to talk about a place that's already going to be hyped up. They're going to be up to 11. I mean, it is going to be a crazy atmosphere, to say the absolute minimum. And if Indiana can come out and just take the game in the first 5 minutes, just get something rolling, that crowd's going to be ready for anything. It can really just amp you up and make you play at a different level. We've seen that happen before. The Knicks are going to have to be ready for anything.
That's going to be the tough part of this for New York, right? Because you slipped in both games at home. Now you do not afford yourself the opportunity to have one of those games where the crowd kind of takes you out of it and, Indiana feeds off that. You have to respond in one of these games, and that might be a very, very, very tall task.
It will be. And I mean, I just want to kind of show once again for both games here. You look at the 3-point differential. You look at turnover differential. Both games. Game 1, 15-7, New York with 8 more turnovers. Game 2, 13-10. Indiana's won the turnover battle in both games. They've lost the rebound battle in both games. In both games, Indiana has shot at least 40% from 3. There's a little bit of a trend there if you look into it. You look at the field goal percentage, Indiana shot 51% in both games. Indiana made 9 of their first 10 shots to start game 2. I mean, they just went straight attacking in New York, and the Knicks had to adjust to it. Indiana's going to do that again to start game 3. They're going to find a way to just, how can we quickly get all momentum on our side? You're already at home. You already have that advantage. I don't want to say if the Knicks get down, 8-10 early that they're going to fold. That's not who they are. But Indiana has now been given an opportunity many teams do not get. A 2-0 series with a very good chance to close things out at home in a conference final. You don't get that opportunity often as the underdog in the series. If you can do that and get your rest, everything is playing out as well as it can for Indiana.
It is, and I'm really curious. So back on the Knicks, Brunson's been doing his saying, and Cat's had some moments, but like OG Anunoby had been good, quite honestly, the first couple games, and he struggled a little bit last series too. Bridges, has been a little wayward at times. Like those guys around Brunson, around Carl Anthony Towns have to really step it up. Josh Hart's been really maybe the only consistent guy the last few games, right? And Mitchell Robinson to a degree. So you got to find some other scoring. You got to take a little load off Jalen Brunson. It's kind of the stuff we talked about when we talked about Minnesota, why they were successful in Game 3 against the Thunder. Of hey, you had some of those other guys step up. It made things easier for Edwards, for Julius Randle. So the Knicks got to find something to that degree. And I need to see that physicality. It hasn't been there for New York in those first two games. And that's a little odd because we've seen them really be able to take it to teams in that regard. Maybe that's more of the way that Indiana plays. It kind of prevents New York from really settling down in that sense, but they've got to find a way. You've got to find something to dig deep, if it's not for Game 3, for Game 4.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. I think that's kind of more of a speed can beat physicality type of deal. You can't set up to play physical if they're already running past you. You just can't do
Right.
that. And I do agree with you. I think OG, was 6 for 11 in game 2, 16 points, was one of the few Knicks that actually had well, I say one of the few, that they only played 8 guys. That's the other problem for New York. You're not as deep of a team as Indiana is. They can go
Yeah,
out and
that's,
play.
that's why, like,
They can go out and play
whether it's
11
OG
guys
or
like they
Everett,
did.
it magnifies it even more. OG could have a 6 for 11 game that's great, but like who else is there?
Yeah.
Somebody like you got to have 3 or 4 guys rolling. If you're only going to play 8, at least half of them have to produce something offensively
Yeah.
for you to have a chance.
Yeah, and everyone's going to have to contribute. I mean, Cameron Payne played 9 minutes, and he had 1 assist and a turnover, and that was it in his 9 minutes.
Yeah,
It just, he might as well have not
that'd be
even been
better.
on the floor. But everyone is going to have to step up for the Knicks, and it's crazy to think about. A few days ago, the whole thing was the Knicks have beaten the Celtics. They get the Pacers again. They have this great opportunity in front of them, and they squandered it. Now it's all, does that pressure start to get to you now if you're Indiana a little bit? I think that's going to be the other key to game 3 if we talk about the opposite. What happens if the Knicks come out scorching on? What happens if that physicality does get set up? All that pressure starts to go to Indiana of, hey, you're up 2-0. You have all the opportunities in the world to effectively end this series tonight. What are you doing? Why are you not putting this thing away? You have all this in front of you. So that's going to be amazing to see. I want to see how that first 6 minutes goes in game 3 because I really do feel that's going to set the tone for the entire game and might just set the tone for the rest of this series.
Yeah, no, for sure. If you're the Knicks in that sense, you got to try to take the air out of the building early. Doesn't mean you have to go out and be up 20 early, but
Yeah.
you got to come out there and show. In those first 6 minutes, like talk about that, hey, we're not just going to lay over and die. Like you got to find a way to kind of curtail that crowd a bit, no doubt.
Yeah, either way, I'm just thrilled to see where this series is going to go. We've had 2 amazing games. That can't be said for a lot of playoff series this year. We've had 2 amazing games back to back. That doesn't happen very often anymore, it feels like. But I'm thrilled to see where this goes. That's kind of the general consensus I've gotten from everyone, though. It's very different comparing how everyone's viewing the West versus the East. Where the West is everyone's got their own narratives, and the East is just this is fun. We're just having fun watching the Pacers and the Knicks like it's 30 years ago. This is great. We're having a great time watching basketball. Then you get to the West, and we're having a whole SGA. Is he a free throw merchant? Is he a basketball
It's
terrorist?
the dang
We're
Civil
we're
War
we're
on the
having
West.
it's a war out there that everyone's just like, you know what? Good job, Knicks and Pacers. Great show. We appreciate it.
I think part of that, though, Kay, to be fair, is that in the West, I think everybody hates each other.
Yeah.
Like legit bad blood. It's been so competitive over these, especially last decade. It's just made for some real bad blood. On the East, hadn't quite been that way. Everybody's glad LeBron's out of that side of the conference finally. You got a lot of fun teams to watch in the East. Yeah, Boston kind of has has had their way, so to speak, but they're not hated per se, right? Now that they're out, now that Cleveland's out, I don't think there's a villain necessarily in the East, especially between Indiana and New York.
Yeah, I
They
mean
might not like each other
the
as
the
far as the rest of
villain,
the league.
yeah.
We're good.
The East is just weird that the villain was Boston, but they're done. people, Philadelphia can't really be a villain if you're not out of the second round. The Knicks have, this is finally their time. I can't think of anyone who hates Indiana unless someone in the Midwest just really hates Indiana. No one really hates them except the Knicks because of this rivalry that happens every once in a while. This is maybe the most likable Knicks team they've had in forever. People just kind of either made fun of them or felt bad for them. Again, aside from the Northeast, I get that's a whole different rivalry. They all hate each other for various reasons. But again,
Sure.
you know, from our perspective as fans of Western Conference teams, you look at them and go, okay, why would I hate either of these teams? Why would I hate Indiana?
Yeah.
That's a weird team to hate. New York, you can get when they're really good for a long period of time, but it's the Knicks. They have not been. They've been through a lot. It's just an interesting period of time where I actually don't care who wins a conference final. It feels very weird to say that.
That is weird. That is weird. Yeah.
It is. You would think you would care, but just I don't. Just give me good basketball and I'll be entertained. What a weird time we live in 2025. But folks, as always, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell as well, and leave a comment down below. Those are all things that you wouldn't think would contribute a lot to YouTube, wouldn't have that big of an impact, but they do. They really do. We do appreciate everyone who subscribes. Closer and closer to 150 subscribers. We truly do appreciate that. If you're listening on Spotify, give us a 5-star review over there and continue to spread the word. Tell your friends about the guys who stare at stats. But folks, as always, until next time, have a good one, everybody.